Hi, Jane. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Brittany. Thanks for having me.
I am really honored to have you on. My podcast producer, Sue Wern, tells me a little bit about the guests that are coming on, and she had the longest memo for you about all the
No.
things you're involved in. And I said, Sue Wern, I said, I think she's me in 5 to 10 years. She goes, oh, yeah. And she's a mom. I was like, oh my gosh, this woman.
Yeah. No, I don't I don't know how I do it. I do work nights clinically, so that frees up my days to work on other projects.
Yeah. Wow. You're amazing. Really. Already. I'm like blown away. I don't even know your story yet. I just have your resume and I'm like, wow, she's incredible. Well, let's start with your background. Our listeners always love to hear, like, how did people end up in femtech? We usually don't, as a kid in kindergarten, say that's what we want to do, work on vaginas. So how did you end up here? Like, where did you grow up? What did you study? Did you have a career before this? And then what are you doing now?
Yeah. So I actually had a career in landscape architecture. And I I love plants, and I love thinking about design. So I am an artist and a writer before I was a doctor. But I had an ectopic pregnancy, and it was actually in the emergency room in 1995. I had the most wonderful third year OBGYN resident who not only saved my life, but also saved my humanity. And I decided in the emergency room that night that I wanted to be her. And
Yeah.
of course, I'm not her, I'm someone else. But it really, I think, points to the power of our kindness, whether we're doctors or teachers or even, the people who work at my grocery store. Kindness goes a long way, a lot farther probably than some of us imagine. And I have to tell you, when I was a fourth year med student, I entered the American Medical Women's Association writing contest. They had an essay contest, and I wrote about this doctor who changed my life. And I ended up winning the contest, and she ended up flying out to Atlanta, where I accepted my award. And I can tell you, there wasn't a dry eye in the house when I read from the essay with her right there.
Jane, when's
So
your movie on Netflix coming out? Like, for real. I'm like, that's a Netflix series right there.
yeah, well, I think it points to the fact that, pregnancy and fertility and infertility and these journeys that we take to becoming a parent or being unable to become a parent when we want to, they speak to really super core elements of how we experience life and our humanity and what it means to be a person and what it means to be a mother. And these journeys are fraught with the greatest joys and sometimes the most devastating disappointments as well. And as the listeners probably know, 1 in 50 pregnancies is ectopic. So it's a very, very common occurrence. And it is one of the highest mortality rates for women in the developing world. Luckily, in the United States, we have access to surgeons and emergency rooms. But when you start bleeding internally, it can be really life threatening. So
Yeah.
I was just so thankful that I was actually on Medicaid. So I didn't have a job at the time or health insurance. Uh, and I was staying with friends. And so the taxpayers of Oregon saved my life as well. So I'm a
Wow.
big proponent of universal health care.
Yes. Oh my God, Jane, I already want you to be my best friend. Like, I'm like, we agree on a lot. We have a lot of similar stories. Like, really quickly for our listeners, because we do have a bunch of listeners who are more femtech consumers, so they
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know
yeah.
all the terms. What's an ectopic pregnancy?
Yeah, so ectopic is where the fertilized egg stops, usually in the tube, most commonly. But crazy stuff happens. The pregnancy can stop in the ovary. It can stop basically anywhere in the abdominal cavity. So yes, it's true that placenta, with its vascular bed, can form a pregnancy anywhere in the abdomen. I know it's crazy to think about. It's children are an invasive species on their mothers. When people use the word parasite, it's not for no reason.
Yep.
But yeah, so ectopic just means it's outside of the uterus. Yeah.
Well, okay. All right. Wow. Well, then obviously that definitely can be a problem. I can imagine. Right. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so you're
So
inspired
to
by the,
answer your,
yeah, sorry,
oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I just continuing your story. So you're
Yeah, yeah,
inspired by
yeah.
this doctor and,
Yeah. So I went into OBGYN. I was really I was fascinated with the pathology of the reproductive tract. I thought the tumors that the ovaries made were way more interesting than the tumors that other organs in the body made. But I also have always been a staunch advocate of women's reproductive rights and social justice. So that was an extra bonus for me becoming an OBGYN. I will say I started the Medical Students for Choice chapter at the University of South Dakota. Yeah, that didn't go over so well, but it continues to this day. So I'm super happy about that. We oftentimes fail to recognize how some of our sisters, mothers, aunts, cousins who live in more rural areas of the country don't have the same access to reproductive health care that those living in urban areas do. We've seen so many rural hospital closures, OBGYN practice closures. I'm sure the pandemic will accelerate both of those. So it's really important to recognize how important uh, having access to reproductive rights are. And so hopefully with today's news out of Georgia, we can hope to turn the tide on some of these issues.
I know I have a little, do your part vote t-shirt from my little dog. And so I took a little like photo shoot of him yesterday and I was like, thinking about you, Georgia, come on,
I know, come on, Georgia.
So, wow, we have a lot of similar passions. Again, I'm already anticipating us being friends. So you're all about women's choice, reproductive rights. You almost had this, life-threatening experience and you were saved by this amazing doctor. So all of this inspiration, what did it boil up into? So I know you've started Maven, you're part of Maven and
Right.
Equity Quotient. So can you tell us about those?
Yeah, so I actually started getting involved in telehealth in 2011. I was with Health Tap, and before even they monetized, and so I got to see how they built their digital platform. And so then in 2016, when I heard about Kate Ryder's company Maven being a telehealth platform solely for women's health, I was ecstatic. I signed up as soon as I heard about it, and I started practicing on the platform. And, I just love the idea of bringing healthcare to women where they were, meeting them where they were. One of my favorite encounters was with a woman who was calling for a birth control prescription. She was walking down the street in Los Angeles. She had her Starbucks iced coffee, and she was obviously going from point A to point B. And I thought, what better time to get the birth control that she needs? And now, at Maven, we have over 25 different types of specialists in women's health and pediatric health. And so we are meeting our clients and our members where they are. There's been a lot of talk about, what some of the barriers to healthcare are for people in different resource brackets of different races and ethnicities. And I know I was talking to someone the other day, sometimes transportation can be a barrier to healthcare. Sometimes having a babysitter can be a barrier to healthcare. So while I don't think that telehealth solves all of healthcare's ills, there are too many to list in this podcast. But telehealth can meet people where they are, and it can break down some of those barriers to accessing healthcare that they need. The other thing that I am just so excited about with Maven is that we take a team approach to healthcare. So imagining that a woman has given birth, her OBGYN is just one provider. On Maven, we have pelvic floor physical therapists who might be helping her if she has postpartum urinary incontinence. We obviously have a lot of mental health specialists, given that 1 out of 5 women, even more now with the pandemic, are experiencing perinatal mood anxiety and mood disorders. We have lactation consultants for those women who might have an engorged duct or early signs of mastitis or not a good latch. We have pediatric occupational therapists. So imagining that healthcare is oftentimes never just one practitioner, but it's delivered by a team of practitioners, each of whom bring their unique experience and abilities to that patient. Um, that to me is really opening eyes and doors, hopefully, and telling women that they should actually be expecting more from their healthcare.
Yeah.
If you have, I've always said, for my patients who have diabetes in pregnancy, the way that medicine is scheduled, we don't have 25 minutes where I can tell you what the difference is between Dannon and Chobani and Yoplait yogurt is in terms of carb count. We really rely on our diabetic educators, nutritionists, and dietitians to be able
Yeah.
to spend that quality time, because let's face it, diabetes is a complex disease. And the choices for food actually begin at the grocery store,
Yeah.
not in the home even. And so giving women the tools that they can make really great decisions about what to shop for, and then how to prepare it, how to eat it, all of which can help their glucose control. We have to recognize that a team approach to so many of these women's health conditions is absolutely the way to move forward. But yeah, I'm excited to be Maven's medical director. And then I also started out in 2015, I think, as an advisor to Flex. Flex is a menstrual product company. They have a cup and a disc. They started out with the disc, and actually they brought me on even before they had product. So I really got to see the genesis, or the birth, if you will, of a company that comes forward even before product, and how do they make a name for themselves, and how do they build a brand, and how do they build a brand with an equity lens too. That to me is something that startups in 2020 have to pay attention to, and I know many do, but it is an essential component of any, especially femtech startup, to do everything you do, whether it's communication, whether it's your product, whether it's your marketing, whether it's assessing your value add. Everything has to be done through an equity lens, and companies, hopefully in their hiring, are managing to bring that equity lens. But if they're not, they need to be deliberate in making sure that they're hearing all the voices that are necessary, not even for them to be successful, but for them to be a morally just company in 2020.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the femtech industry is doing a decent job of that?
Yes and no. Yes and no. Like, I don't want to diss on anyone, but I am so passionate about femtech in part because I don't want to see another pill club. I don't want to see another femtech startup started by two bros in Silicon Valley who thought, oh yeah, let's make some money on women's healthcare. No.
Yeah. I feel the same way. I feel like we're better than a lot of industries, but at the same time, like, we have so much more to do. That's why we, at Femtech Focus have specific episodes about Black women's health, Latina health, right? Because it's like, when we talk about like what is saturated, and we say, oh, well, fertility is a pretty saturated area. And it's like, yeah, for affluent white women. But like, if you look at any other category of women, it's not helped at all yet,
Oh my gosh, exactly. And I think the hard part there too, as many of these startups will tell you, is that the VC environment still has a long way to go. Whenever I hear Lauren Schulte Wang, she's the founder and CEO of Flex. When she describes what it was like for her to go to Silicon Valley and ask for seed funding for a menstrual product company, and everyone at the table was a white male, and and many couldn't wrap their mind around what it was that she was trying to sell, despite the fact that the menstrual product industry is worth, I think, like 5 billion. I could be wrong on that, but it's a lot of money. But still, you see people in business and finance, and they'll say something like, oh, well, let me talk to my wife about this idea, or let me talk to my daughter. And the fact of the matter is, maybe we should have other people at the table too.
Yes, 100%, 100%. I actually, I met Scott Kapoor from A16Z, Andreessen Horowitz, and I asked him, how are you empowering more women to control capital? And he started to go into this talk about how funding female founders is important. And I said, no. Not my question. My question is, how do we get more women controlling the capital? Because if we do that, then we don't have to talk about funding female founders. They'll automatically do it.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, yeah. And then went on with a really fantastic answer. But I feel like our neuro pathway is females, entrepreneurship, funding female founders. Like there's no other neuro pathway that says like, how else can we think about women in entrepreneurship? Like maybe women in GP positions, maybe women's healthcare,
Yeah. And to that end, I'm really passionate about exactly what you said, but also about supporting my female colleagues. So I help to admin a group of almost 5,000 women OBGYNs. We are a 501c3, we're the OB Mom Group. And what I want my colleagues in OBGYN to be thinking about, if they are interested, is I have a great idea. How do I get from my great idea to a pitch deck? How do I get my pitch deck to a seed round? How do I get my seed round to a Series A? And so I want to see women in women's health solving problems in women's health. I get it that people go to McKinsey and they come up with great ideas. I don't want to say, you have to be a women's healthcare provider to have a great idea, but I also want to see those of us who work in the trenches begin to think about how we might transition into an entrepreneur. And so to that end, I really love supporting my colleagues in women's health to get there. A great example you guys are probably familiar with is Dr. Lindsay Harper, Dallas OBGYN with Rosie. Another company that I've seen, grow from a tiny little seedling into a company that wins awards now. And so, Lindsay is absolutely one of my sheroes. But I know that there are other women out there doing amazing things and ideas yet to be born.
Yeah. My co-founder, Dr. Julia Keene, pediatric gynecologist, inventor of a vaginal stent, because she was tired of using makeshift devices for her pediatric patients when they had reconstructive surgery or anything for their vagina. And she was like, how has nobody made a stent? They've made a stent for every other orifice of the body except for my patient's vagina, And so that's absolutely right. We need more doctors. The doctors are generally, my understanding, MDs, doctors are risk adverse, right? Like you're dealing with life, so you should be risk adverse, right? But getting them more comfortable with investing and inventing and going on the edge of stuff and like thinking outside the box, outside the textbook, right? Outside the flashcards.
Yeah. And let's be honest, one of the biggest hurdles is in fact the requirements that they put on themselves, which we know from data that women feel like they have to be 120% prepared and qualified in order to apply for a job. Whereas men are comfortable in the 65 to 75% range. How do we give women the confidence to say, I might not have every single answer. I might not know every single iteration and algorithm of solving for this problem, but I know enough. And I am going to, I'm confident enough to convince others to invest in me. So that too is a really important conversation, I feel, to have with women and to open up those spaces where they can feel free to fail. Likely, as much as women prepare, they probably aren't going to fail. That's the truth.
Yeah. Well, I had a startup that did go under, and closing that company was so emotionally stressful because I felt like I was letting down all female founders. Right? I had this internal sense of doom, like, oh my God, now that I failed, none of my investors will ever make a female founder investment again, which is not the case. But like, I felt like I had that world, this gender world that I had to lift up. And then, I became a venture capitalist and I worked at a venture fund, and it was called Capital Factory. I love them. They're an amazing team, but working with the general partner showed me I could definitely be a VC. Like I thought like that was something that you needed to be like super duper financial expert, mathematician, MBA, business. And I was
Right,
like,
right,
oh
right,
no, I could do this. Like I could totally do this. So
Yeah.
listeners, if you are like thinking you're not ready, you were probably ready yesterday.
You're
All
probably
right?
ready.
You were probably ready yesterday. Just go for it.
Yeah.
Speaking of equity in healthcare, I wanted to ask you, for Maven being a telehealth service, obviously it's more equitable because it's more accessible physically, right? But what about price point? Because I also was hearing you say like there's this team effort. Does the team make it more expensive or less expensive than if you saw these people individually? Tell me about that part of the equity.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. We definitely have direct to consumer on Maven. So to your point, yeah, I think the price points are actually really reasonable. Especially, if you're going to talk to a doctor versus a
Mhm.
doula versus a nurse practitioner versus a lactation consultant. Uh, for mental health, if you consider that a 1 hour appointment with a LCSW or LMFT equivalent out in the community is oftentimes somewhere between $150 and $300. On Maven, it's about 70. So really, really big price drop there. But the fact is that a lot of people access Maven through their employer. So, for instance, we just launched with AT&T 1-1. And it's a really exciting partnership. AT&T is offering Maven to all of its employees. So that means any man or woman and their dependents can access Maven, and it's a benefit that AT&T provides. So a lot of people access Maven for free through their employer,
Love
and
it.
that's actually, I mean, when you think about it, unlimited access to mental health, unlimited access to pediatricians and obstetricians and genetic counselors and reproductive endocrine and infertility specialists. I mean, it blows your mind that um, employers recognize that employee health matters, and they recognize too that 20% of millennials identify as LGBTQ. People are having families; they're having them in different ways. And employees, if they want to retain great talent, they need to be able to meet the employees where they are, and meet their healthcare needs. So, I
You know,
mean, bravo to those companies that recognize that, right?
100%. So when I started the Femtech Focus podcast in March of last year, I can say that now, or officially in January
Right,
2021.
yeah.
I was so interested to see how many people I interviewed that said, "Oh, our business model is via HR. Like it's employers that actually pay for this. Like women don't actually pay for this." And I'm like, "What?" And I hear it again and again and again, and now hearing it through Maven. It is an amazing business model because it's like, well, if we want to like empower women because they're so unequivocally underserved and by the healthcare system, it almost hurts to ask them for their money. I love asking AT&T for the money instead of the woman, right? And then just
Yeah.
providing the service. And as an investor, it's very sexy, right? It's a very sexy business model. I just feel like there's just so many benefits to it. Is there ever a concern about data privacy?
Oh, definitely. And it's funny you say that because there was an article, I want to say yesterday or the day before, about companies with data privacy issues that make it so that you should consider avoiding these apps. And one of our competitors, Ovia, was on that list. So I think you know we have an upcoming partnership with Microsoft.
Mm,
They are doing incredible due diligence about data privacy in their
yeah.
relationship with us. So definitely, I think as a consumer, as someone who's accessing these benefits maybe through their employer, I think it's always really good to ask about your data privacy. Um, Hopefully companies do the right thing, but they don't always. And so where does that compliance come from? And if it needs to come from the bottom up, from employees demanding it, well then so be it. Yeah, but yeah, definitely great question.
Yeah. How would you recommend, like, for me, again, I believe I am a smart, intelligent woman, But if I was concerned about one of the apps on my phone not having secure data privacy, I literally have no idea where to go or what to check on. So like, how would a consumer know? Because I want consumers to use femtech products. So how do we tell them how to vet femtech products for that? Do you know?
No, that's that's a really good question. I feel like someone more educated than myself. I mean, I would, honestly, I would Google, because there have been articles about some of these apps.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like we need to do it a panel and a white paper on it, because I was actually asking for myself too.
Yeah. But let's not end this tech podcast without talking about Equity Quotient, which is my baby.
Yes, please do.
Yeah. So in 2017, I had gone through a Me Too moment, and I looked at my then, I guess, 9-year-old daughter, and I said, if I don't actually make something, I really might not have the ability to expect that the workplace will be any better in 15 years for her. And so I got together with Dr. Esther Chu. She's professor of emergency medicine at Oregon Health Sciences. And we created what we thought was going to be an app. So we created an app that measures equity in the healthcare workplace. We ended up not using the app. Now it's web-based. We use Qualtrics. But what we thought was, we saw a lot of people wanting to address issues of equity in their workplace, be it around gender, be it around race, be it around sexual identity or orientation, and not necessarily having the diagnostic tools to know how to fix the problem. Right. We've seen since the George Floyd murder, a lot of companies come out saying that they are committed to addressing inequity in their workplaces. But the fact of the matter is, we argue that unless you do a really thorough and good diagnostic analysis of where inequity lives in your organization, throwing money at solutions may or may not benefit you, your brand, your integrity, and fundamentally how people show up and experience your workplace. And so that's the tool that we created. So we give employers a dashboard of equity measured in 5 key domains: safety, respect, value, hiring, pay, promotion, and overall culture. So, our product is similar to, say, Culture Amp or Culture IQ, but we're dialing down into equity. And I love our tool. I think it's outstanding. And so in this way, we are able to give a CEO or a COO a more detailed description of the types of steps that might be necessary to fix problems around equity in their organization, in addition to doing the obvious, which might be like a pay gap analysis, or having an expert come in and look at their policies, maybe around family leave, maybe around hiring, pay, and promotion, that sort of thing. But what we want to get at is, what does it feel like to show up for work there? And is it an equitable environment to work in?
Yeah. Well, what if the results show scandal? Well, how does CEOs handle that? And especially if they're the scandaler, if that's the right word, but.
Yeah, so I think that's such a great question. And the fact of the matter is I love this story, because when Esther and I created our company, we were just so excited to release it into the world. And we thought that everyone would be calling us. We were absolutely sure that, that everyone was going to be like emailing us and knocking at our door. And the fact of the matter is, Brittany, crickets. The fact of the matter is that asking these questions takes a level of bravery and courage from the C-suite that very few are able to muster. And the fact of the matter is that we've seen so many decades of symbolic compliance around equity that they aren't actually used to looking under the hood and finding out, what does it feel to work? What does it feel like to work here?
The opposite of denial, man.
It is denial. And we saw that with, I don't know if you followed the Indiana University CEO, his quote unquote apology for the treatment of Dr. Susan Moore in his hospital. And he came off as defensive. And he came, I mean, the only thing that was positive I thought about his statement was his commitment to an external review. Hopefully that external reviewer is someone who speaks with truth and honesty and integrity about what's broken in the system, because what happened to Dr. Susan Moore is a Swiss cheese of brokenness, right? Because it wasn't just one person, it wasn't just one unit. It was a series of events that had with them bias, whether it was conscious or unconscious. His racism, where he said that she was, I can't even remember the words, but I loved Dr. Joya Creer-Perry. She's an OBGYN colleague of mine, and she said, we as physicians, we often hide behind the technicalities of our language. We hide the racism behind the technicality when we explain away an unfortunate event or a death or an adverse outcome, when the fact of the matter is that we haven't asked enough questions about the racism within our system to actually really even begin to fix the problem. And that's what we at Equity Quotient, what we want to do is we want to ask all the questions that get at the problem, because you can't fix the problem unless you ask those questions.
That's right.
But corporate America, I'm so sorry, they deserve no passes, because they have been doling out, sexual harassment training videos that do nothing, unconscious bias training that does nothing, and they're really not fixing the problem. And thankfully, people are demanding more transparency and more integrity in addressing issues around harassment, discrimination, and equity justice.
You are
Sorry.
amazing. You are amazing. Seriously, we're going to talk more. I know you're a busy woman. You got to go. I have two last really quick questions. Okay. The first one is, we have a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs that listen. If there is an area in women's health that needs more innovation, what is it?
Well, I think fundamentally, I'll go back to equity. I think that, we haven't solved how to deliver healthcare equitably, especially to under-resourced women. And so I think there's a lot of solutions around equity that need to be addressed. I recognize that sometimes it's fun to chase after well-resourced persons, who have the ability to purchase an app or purchase a service or something like that. But when you look at huge problems, that to me is one of the biggest, another one that comes to mind is endometriosis. We have 1 in 10 women suffering from endometriosis, oftentimes debilitating menstrual cycles and pain. There are just so many aspects of women's healthcare that deserve more attention, more resources, more funding, more everything, so that women can show up as mothers, as workers, as entrepreneurs, as CEOs, and have someone else helping them solve some of their healthcare issues.
I love it. And our last question is, what do you think the femtech industry as a whole needs the most right now in order to be successful?
I like your idea. I like the idea of giving women and persons of color and Black women capital.
Yep. Just give them the money.
Give them the money. Give them the money. Because the fact is that we oftentimes don't know how to solve for what we can't see.
Yes.
So we have to bring people to the table with the problems that we can't see, because they weren't ours, because we never bothered to listen or didn't hear them. But we need that diversity, and we need it yesterday.
Jane, you are incredible. You are a boss babe. You're my new favorite friend. You're awesome. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Brittany. And I hope we get to talk again soon.
Oh, we will. I know it. Bye.
Bye.